Ever notice how some people are just like really self-sufficient? And I
Yeah.
mean, to the point where it's almost like too much.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they almost push you away with how independent they are.
Right.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today. Dismissive avoidant attachment. We're going to like unpack that whole thing, what it is, how it shows up in adults,
Yeah.
and most importantly, how to navigate it, whether it's in yourself or, maybe you're dating someone who's got this going on.
Absolutely.
But don't worry, this isn't about slapping labels on anyone. Think of it more like we're adding some seriously juicy vocabulary to your relationship repertoire.
You hit on something really interesting there, that too much independence can actually be a big clue to someone's attachment style, which, is basically rooted in their earliest experiences.
Yeah. Okay, so back up for a sec. Because, full disclosure, I did not minor in psychology. What's the deal with attachment theory in the first place?
Okay, so picture a baby, totally helpless, right?
Yeah.
They need someone to take care of their needs, and not just like food and shelter, but emotional connection too,
Right. Right.
Attachment theory basically says that those early experiences with caregivers, those first relationships, they totally shape how we view ourselves and relationships, like forever.
Okay, that makes sense. So if like your people were super responsive, you'd learn to like trust that connection.
Exactly.
But then what happens when those needs aren't met consistently? Like what happens to that little kid?
That's where things get really interesting. Your source material talks about this example of a kid on a playground, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So this securely attached kid, they're going to explore, but they're going to keep looking back to make sure their parent is still there. It's like they have this safe home base.
Totally. We've all been that kid, like needing that reassurance from mom or dad before going down the big slide.
Exactly. But for the kid whose caregiver is like distracted, maybe they're on their phone or they're deep in conversation with someone else,
Oh.
and the kid falls and cries out, but their distress isn't really met with comfort, not consistently anyway, the message they get is very different.
Ouch. I bet that starts to create some pretty deep-seated patterns, even if it's not, like, intentional on the parent's part.
It does. And your source material describes it perfectly. It says, these are the children who seem very mature and grow up too fast, appearing precocious out of necessity.
Right.
They basically learn self-reliance, not because they're choosing it, but as a way to cope.
So it's not that they don't need connection. It's more like they've learned not to rely on it.
Precisely. And while that adaptation is, like, essential in childhood, it can create some really, really complex dynamics later on, especially when it comes to romantic relationships.
It's, like, fascinating seeing how this all plays out in dating, right? I mean, relationships are complicated enough
Oh, tell me about...
without all this subconscious baggage from, like, childhood.
Right.
So we're going to unpack how these early patterns, the stuff we talked about, how that can actually create some, well, interesting, or maybe we should say complicated dynamics when it comes to romance.
For sure.
So our source material lists like all these classic dismissive-avoidant traits. Difficulty expressing needs, keeping their distance, that kind of thing. But can we like bring this to life a bit? Any like scenarios that really scream dismissive-avoidant?
Absolutely, yeah. Your source material actually mentions like difficulty maintaining eye contact, which on its own isn't that unusual.
Sure.
But picture this. You're on a date, seems to be going well, but you notice your date is looking everywhere but at you.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Suddenly the salt and pepper shakers are very interesting.
Right, darting eyes, maybe they're like checking their phone, suddenly fascinated by the menu.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're trying to escape connection, even when it's right there in front of them.
Totally. And it's like, that's so much more revealing than just, avoids eye contact on a list of traits.
Right.
Because it shows that discomfort with intimacy, even when they might actually be into you.
Exactly. And that whole push-pull thing can be so confusing for the other person.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because the dismissive-avoidant person might actually crave the connection, but then as soon as it starts to feel real, all those old defenses kick in.
And it's not even about you, really. It's about their own, like, internal struggle.
Precisely.
Which honestly probably explains why they often end up with people who are anxiously attached, those who are more comfortable with or even like drawn to that chase dynamic.
Unfortunately, that is a super common and often super painful pattern. It's not intentional or anything, but that unconscious need to recreate familiar relationship dynamics can be really strong.
Okay, there's one more trait I have to ask about because I see this all the time.
Yeah.
I'm dying to get your expert take on it. Ready for this? Overanalyzing the relationship, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yes. The classic self-sabotage mechanism of the dismissive-avoidant.
Right.
They basically convince themselves the relationship is doomed even if things are going well.
Why do they do that?
It's a way to protect themselves from, like, potential heartbreak down the line.
So it's like by finding the flaw, by like predicting the downfall in advance, they maintain some sense of control in a situation that probably feels terrifyingly out of control, which is intimacy. At least that's how I make sense of it.
It's exactly. Vulnerability. For someone with this attachment style, it can feel incredibly dangerous. So they kind of create these escape routes in their heads so they don't get hurt. Which is heartbreaking because those very defenses, they often become self-fulfilling prophecies.
It's like they're pushing their partners away without even realizing it.
Yeah?
It makes you wonder, like, is it even possible for someone with this dismissive-avoidant attachment style to have a healthy, fulfilling relationship?
Oh, absolutely. It's not a life sentence or anything.
Okay, good.
The brain is actually incredibly adaptable.
That's good to hear.
With effort and, like, the right support, change is possible. And it's not about erasing who they are, but about learning new ways of relating to themselves and to others.
Okay, so change is possible, which is, like, so good to hear.
Right.
But I'm guessing it's not exactly easy, right?
You're telling me.
It's like we're talking about, like, rewriting the emotional code you've been running your whole life. So where does someone even begin to untangle those ingrained patterns and, like, actually start doing relationships differently?
You're right. It's not like flipping a switch. But here's the thing. Our brains are wired for connection, even when, like, past experiences have made us a little wary, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Think of it like, imagine you're learning a new language.
Okay.
You're not going to be fluent overnight. But with practice, with patience, you can get more and more comfortable expressing yourself in this, like, new way.
I love that, learning a new language of, like, intimacy and connection. So, so good. So what are some of the, like, the building blocks of this new language? What are some concrete steps someone can take to, like, move towards those healthier relationship patterns?
Well, I think small steps are key. It's not about suddenly becoming a different person overnight, but more about those little changes that feel doable. You know? Like, one powerful step is practicing vulnerability, but in safe spaces.
Okay. I like that.
So this might start maybe sharing, like, a small worry with a close friend before diving into the deep end with, like, a romantic partner, right?
Totally. Dipping their toes in the vulnerability pool first.
Exactly.
And what about therapy? That seems like it could be super helpful here.
Oh, absolutely. Therapy can be huge EE.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about fixing something that's broken, but more about, like, learning new skills.
Right.
A good therapist can help someone, you know, with his attachment style, really understand where those patterns come from and then, like, equip them with some healthier coping mechanisms to deal with all of it.
Yeah, it's like having a relationship coach in your corner.
Exactly.
Okay, that's amazing for, like, anyone listening who's like, whoa, this is me. But what about the people who are, like, in relationships with someone dismissive-avoidant? Where do they even begin to navigate all of that?
That's where this source material gets really insightful, honestly. The key takeaway: understanding, not judgment.
Ooh, I like that.
Because it's easy to, like, take those avoidant behaviors personally, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're not interesting enough or worthy enough.
Totally.
But it's not about you. It's about their past and the defenses they've built up because of it.
That's way easier said than done, though. Like, my brain gets it, but emotionally, it still stings when someone you care about is, like, pushing you away.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, setting healthy boundaries comes in. You can't force someone to change, but you can be super clear about your own needs, what you will and won't accept in the relationship.
You know, there's this one line from the source material that really stuck with me. Don't chase your partner. They will outrun you. They are experts at excessive independence. It's like a warning, but also kind of empowering at the same time.
It is empowering because it reminds us to, like, focus on ourselves,
Okay, right.
our needs, our own growth,
Right.
rather than putting all our energy into trying to change someone else.
No.
You can't control how someone else shows up, but you can control how you show up, right?
Which, you know, kind of loops us back to secure attachment.
Totally.
Like, even if we didn't have that, like, ideal start in childhood,
Yeah.
we can learn to become a secure base for ourselves.
Yes.
And from that place, we can create healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those old, like, unhelpful patterns and consciously choosing to respond in a new way. It takes work, but the rewards, huge EE.
I love it. On that note of hope and the incredible resilience of, like, the human heart. I think we've done a pretty amazing job unpacking this whole dismissive avoidant thing. But you know me, I like to leave our listeners with something to ponder. If our attachment styles are so deeply shaped by our early experiences,
Mm.
how much do those experiences continue to influence us as adults? And how can, understanding those early blueprints help us create a more fulfilling, more connected present? Something to think about. Join us next time as we delve into another fascinating topic. It's going to be good. You don't want to miss it.